I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the many lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Hi everyone, my name's Kathy and welcome to a special In Conversation event with Andrew Kwong. We are absolutely thrilled to have Andrew Kwong here with us today. Andrew is a local author and a local doctor running a general practice at Wyoming since the late 1970s. His memoir, One Bright Moon, was released this year and has already reached many media personalities across the country and is heavily reserved in our libraries where it is available both in print and ebook. I'm very pleased for the opportunity not only to read Andrew's memoir, but also to discuss his beautifully written story with him today. I'd like you to join me in welcoming Andrew. Andrew, I've had the honor of reading your book in preparation for this discussion, and I think it is the quickest I've ever read a non-fiction book. You had me in right from the start. For those who haven't read the book, could you please share some insight into your story and how you came to put it down on paper in this lovely, beautiful book?
For the last many years that I've been thinking about it as I was getting older and the children are getting also older, and I thought it would be nice if I put my little life story for them, and that was the motive in the beginning. And I I kind of talk to them from time to time, try to keep them quiet in the back seat, the three of them sitting there going to Sydney. I'm going to the Gold Coast for school holidays. I'll go to Queensland and they get bored. So I start telling them stories. And then, of course, then they love it. They knew a little bit here and a little bit there. But I thought, from my own patients I deal with, and they have marvelous, absolutely unbelievable, gorgeous stories, yet they don't put it down. And I kept saying to them, look, we should put it down, and then your children would then have no argument about what actually happened. It's similar to my great grandmother's story, being a woman in those days in the late 1900s, and they had to find the young girl's feet so tight, so bad, she could hardly walk. And then she married to my great grandfather on the wedding day, and she somehow got tumbled out of the sedan chair. They carried her to the man's house, to the groom's place for the celebration. And because one of the two poles snapped, and poor thing, she was in such a sad situation. However, um, I heard about these stories from so many of my aunts and great aunts and older cousins and so on. And eventually I got all the facts together and I thought, no, I'm going to write down. And I don't want my children to argue like my great aunts and cousins and older generations argue about the incident. So I decided to write down and I just would not have any idea how to write a story. I mean, present it nicely. And the original draft was just like boring. So then I thought I better learn how to write. So I went back. I took up writing courses with the local community college. Unfortunately, it's no longer functioning. And then met with some lovely people there. They all wanted to learn how to write, and we had a great months of maybe 3 months of the course. So one thing led to another, and then I thought I better present it in more uh, kind of receptive way to whoever reader who would like to learn it. So I took more courses during the time. So that's why it took me over 10 years to do this book.
Wow, 10 years. And honestly, it was worth every minute. The writing is beautiful. There's some really, really beautiful passages in there. And it tells the story for those people who haven't read the book, it tells the story of Andrew's childhood. About him growing up, and I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce the province where you grew up correctly. What was the name of your town?
It's called Shiqi, which situates right at the mouth of the Pearl River Delta, which is the Pearl River is the third longest, biggest river in China. And there are three major rivers, and the Pearl is a little smallest one, but still means thousands of kilometers inland, all the way, nearly all the way to the Himalayas. That's where the water came from.
And so you're in your hometown as a young child, and this is how the book sort of commences. Obviously, we have the story of the bridal procession and the unfortunate accident that happened with that. But we also have your story in there as well, two of you as a young child growing up in a very unique time in China. You've had your civil war that's now ended, and you're now under the new communist form of living, I guess, for want of a better word. But you're sort of taking the great leap forward. It's not the Cultural Revolution as yet, but it's a time of great unrest and uncertainty and fear and famine. And this is the life that you were born into. And did you want to tell us a little bit about some of your childhood memories from that time?
Sure. And because, like my contemporaries, I was born around the time that the People's Republic was declared, was um, set up under Chairman Mao. And if I might take the audience back a little bit about Chinese history, for over 100 years, ever since the first Opium War, China had been completely demolished and became very poor. If we would go back further in the 1400s and up until the 1400s or the 14th or maybe the 15th and 16th century, China used to be the world number one economy and country. But then over time, and China was just broken down into pieces. And Chairman Mao came along. He promised so much because he could say 95% of the people were so dreadfully poor. And then by the time the first Opium War was fought over the sales of opium to China, and China started to just break down. And then over that 150 years, China was so wretchedly poor. Then because it was a communist state, a new communist state, then the world sanction um, was declared on this young republic, and China had no one to trade with and no aid except from perhaps from Russia, and it was so poor. But Chairman Mao probably was impatient, trying to get China up and fulfill the promises he made to the peasants. The majority of the people were so poor, and so in about 1958-59, that was the second five-year plan. Now, China planned things ahead, had long terms and 5-year plans. They don't have 6 months budgets, but it's 5-year budgets. So they plan 5 years ahead. Sometimes they even plan for 10 years ahead. So it's always been long-term planning. And and then of course, he was so popular and so convincing. And then we all believed that, even though we were little kids, we just born into all the propagandas and telling us how hard we should work to rebuild the country again. So everyone was really patriotic, and you just got swept into it and worked hard towards a common goal. Um, so, so that's how it all started. But unfortunately, there was no resources. China was so poor, and nothing they could do, and nothing they could do much. But the planning probably wasn't perfect, and it just after a year or two, it just showed so badly done. And then China would then lapse into great starvation because they couldn't get any grain, because a lot of people spend so much time in making steel and building infrastructures, and no one would go to look after the field, so to speak, and no food. And then there was the natural famines, natural drought somewhere, and then there was also the big flooding down south, as China is today. Right at this moment, they're facing huge flooding problems, huge, a lot of water everywhere, and our town so close to the to the mouth, right at the estuary. Excuse me, right at the estuary of the Pearl River Delta, we caught a lot of flooding. And I remember, my, I could say, fond memory was floods would come in every summer, and it wasn't summer without flooding. So we used to, well, our bedrooms were built about 2 or 3 feet above the lounge room, and it was all tiled. So the fish and snakes and eels and all sorts of things would swim in, and then we would throw a line into the lounge room and catch fish. So so that sort of situation. So so yes,
Yeah.
so it was not a great success whatsoever, and
No.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we that they would then say, these historians would tell us later on, years later, that that famine was the biggest famine, that 10% at least, according to conservative calculation, about 10% of the population died from starvation. And now, at the time, it was about 500 million people.
Wow. That's
So that was the
huge.
background. So we kids, we just grew into it. We wouldn't know anything for better. We just
Exactly.
would go along. Yes.
Exactly. And I mean that's what comes across, and that's one of the passages which I see where you say that you just followed it. You wanted it to be part of that society and wanted to pull your weight under the communist the communist ways. And there's a passage, and if you're happy for me to read it, I'd like to read this passage. It's fairly early on in your story, and it's a scene which could have been played out from my childhood or my children's childhood or
Oh,
any home across the world. And this is Andrew, for to set the scene. This is Andrew when he's um, about to start school, about to start kindergarten, and it's about his school bag, which is a very important thing for any child starting school. I searched my school bag, similar to the ones my older sisters had. I had waited a long, long time for it. Then, suddenly, the week before kindergarten was due to start, there it was, right next to my pillow as I opened my eyes one morning. This khaki school bag with a belt that you could swing over your shoulder. Every day I'd put it on and march up and down the house like a little People's Liberation Army PLA soldier, feeling like I couldn't wait for the big day to come. I smelled its sweet raw cotton, felt the strong coarse fabric, and cherished the red star. And to me, that just it just had me hooked from that moment. Is this is a story that could have taken place anywhere, and but it took place in your home, in your country, and it's absolutely amazing the way that you've put this down on to paper. Um, So, yeah, and I particularly like it because you've got that innocence of a child where you're blindly wanting to follow the new rules, the new way forward, the great progression. And it's not until we see you a lot older and a lot further along through the passage that we start to see you doubt that. We start to see the cracks start to appear. Um, and, can you tell us, was there a pivotal moment where you kind of realized that something wasn't quite going to go to plan?
Well, going to school was exciting, and it was even more exciting that I often had both my parents walking me to school and walking back, and it would take half an hour one way. And after a little while, and I started to think, why, why don't my parents go to work? And then gradually, well, then I heard them talking to each other, and they're so worried that both of them were not assigned job. Now, in those days, the government assigned jobs to you. Everything was centrally controlled. And not so much today. Everyone could get a job if you can find a job. But in those days, it was assigned, and you had to be politically correct, and qualification wasn't much the number one priority, but politically you had to be correct for the revolution. So then gradually I realized that both my parents, I thought both of them were university graduates, and they were teachers in before the liberation. And then I shared their worries about how to look after four little children, two older sisters and one little sister. There were four of us, and yeah, and then I start to worry about it, and then they all have they all had to go and attend evening political meetings every evening. I think maybe one night a week they didn't need to. They would carry their little stool to some local school, and they would be there until about 9 o'clock before they came home. And it still didn't dawn on me until they arrested my father and accusing him of being counter-revolutionary. And that was a scary thing, to be accused as counter-revolutionary, because the penalty would be severe, you see. And they use this so-called education and gradually educate the public. But if someone was counter-revolutionary, that means they consider you as recalcitrant, can't be can't be helped, and they'll put you in jail. So then he was sentenced to jail. So that was the time that I thought to myself, as I often couldn't sleep until daybreak, that I often would be up and sitting on the levee wall and missing my father, thinking, working out what's going on. Why is it so? Why is it so unfair to my father and to my family?
Yeah, and I mean that passage in the book where your father is arrested, it's I could feel the heartbreak coming through on that passage, and it must have been as a young child very, very scary.
Very scary. And
Yeah.
of course, you heard about people being executed and by firing squad and all this. It was really unnerving.
Yeah, yeah, and education is your parents were university educated, and it's another theme throughout your book, education. So the intellectuals were displaced basically during this period, during this turbulent period. Um, but it's so very important to you and to your family. What role did education play in your childhood, and how did it change over the years?
Um, well, before my father was marched away, he kept reminding us, make sure you get a good education. That was the part.
Yeah, and you've certainly done that. You have certainly done that. You've exceeded what a lot of people who are born and raised in Australia are able to do in terms of their education, and I like that reading played a huge part as well too in your story and in your world. Your father was a great reader. He used to like to read the classics.
Yeah.
That comes across, and we also see you really, really enjoying Shakespeare, in particular Hamlet, where you're sitting
Yes.
outside the principal's office at the college in Hong Kong.
Yes.
You were so determined to get that education that you wanted, that your father had instilled in you. And you're sitting there and you're reading and rereading Hamlet. Um,
Yeah.
Priceless. Absolutely priceless. Do you still read a lot for pleasure? Is there something in particular that you like to read?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite prepare to read something, but Hamlet, as most of us, by the time we got to high school, we all had to study Hamlet in third form. I think it may even be second form, or year 8 or year 9, and that was in Hong Kong. But that particular school still is the number one school, the best school in Hong Kong for boys. And uh, Hamlet, a lot of my friends, they don't particularly like Hamlet. They rather read Romeo and Juliet, and it was more romantic. But Hamlet was a bit depressing. I don't know why I kept reading Hamlet. Probably because I got so annoyed with him, couldn't make up his mind, just like my friends, and they got so annoyed they threw the book away. But I thought I kept reading it. I don't know why, but the more I read it, the more I understand the man being caught. And then the more I start to think, perhaps I'm in the same situation. I hadn't, I don't want to become a Hamlet. So I just kept reading it and hopefully praying that maybe there's a solution that I can break through. So my breakthrough came when, when the headmaster, brother cast me in, and he got so fed up with me. I think at the end, after 5 weeks or 4 or 5 weeks, every day outside his office, he won't see me. But on a Friday, at the end of that period, and he took me into his office and told me I was a pain. You're such a pain. What do you want? I just say, brother Caspi, I just want to be one of your students. So, so that was a turning point for my education. That I knew then once I got in, I knew then it was just amazing school, and it really has proven right because we have a very strong old boys association, and we now with Facebook and WhatsApp and all this, we link together just like that. We can link and talk to anyone. And the boys, a lot of successful boys from that college still is today. So I was really blessed to be at that school. And so it again proved that my father was right. And later on I read humanity. There are really four pillars for our humanity to be called humanity is they're equally important. One is education. Now the number one thing should be food. So everyone should not be starving. And shelter. Everyone should have a place to go home to call home. And the third thing is education, whereby your children get a good education and they have a, a good future ahead of them. And then the fourth thing is um, is affordable medical care that people are looked after. So, so I got my education. So then I wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah, you see early on in your childhood, you wanting to care for other people and the humanity that does come through, not just with you, but your family and your community as well too, is that everybody is, you are all in that together and you all are trying to
Absolutely.
help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's, if I may just jump ahead, and
Mm.
that's, I've been thinking about it. Writing the book made me do a lot of thinking about what is it all about. And, you could get angry, you could get upset, you could get really, really upset. Why my family? Why was it so cruel and so on? And then through writing the story, I got rid of it from my chest and I felt even happier. I mean, in the old days, I just buried them. I don't talk about it outside the family, and so no one knew about it except my direct family. And and I was able to right away. I call it rotten anger and unfairness that could stop you from progressing in what you want to do. And I'm really pleased that I put it on paper and then get rid of that. And now I'm free. I'm happy.
Well, I'm
Uh,
really pleased that you put it on paper as well too, because otherwise I would not have been able to read this beautiful story, and neither and your story may have been lost if we didn't have it written down. Um, I like that you do mention that your family as well too, and you're very close. You have a very close relationship with all of your family, and when we
yes,
say family, I'm talking your mother, your father, your sisters, your uncles, your aunts, your extended family, your friends who are family.
yes,
You are all there supporting each other through this very difficult time. Does tell us a little bit about your family.
yes. Well, I had three sisters, but my younger sister passed on, um, and uh, my second oldest sister, she had gone away and stayed with grandma, my maternal grandmother, to relieve the family's burden in the early days. And she ended up spending most of her life away from the family until I went to Hong Kong. And then I was the only sibling that she spent most of the time with. And the others two, the oldest one and the youngest one, they were because my father, when he got back from jail, from labor camp, and he declared that that's it, we have to go. If we don't go, there's no future for the children. So, so my father and I left China. I was legally allowed to leave for some reason, but I'll come back to that. But my father wasn't. He made his way out, so he escaped from China and ended in Hong Kong. And my mother and the two sisters were just suffer because of that for many years until later on over the years we tried to get them out, and eventually when China changed its policy in the late 70s and early 80s, and in the 70s when President Nixon visited China, and that things start to look up under a new also under a new chairman in China. And that was really when, from 1976 on, when Chairman Mao died, that they changed the whole policy, allowing people to, they really have a nice plan to promote the welfare of the Chinese people. So the last 40 odd years, they just did that, and it was just so rapidly and so amazingly that when I went back years later, and I just couldn't recognize the place and how happy the people are these days. It's different, so I'm happy for them. And now, talking about all the other people helping, and it it didn't dawn on me until Tracy Spicer's book club interviewed me on Zoom. With There's a lady called Yumi Steins, and she somehow felt that compassion. My goodness, she was saying, "Wow, it was the compassion." And that made me realize that, in fact, the stories I told had described without me knowing it, that how compassionate people were so willing to help you when you're down.
Yeah, yeah,
And
they
so,
they were.
so that's what a good society is judged upon. It's not how wealthy that society is, but it's how much assistance and help uh, we give. We look after the older and disabled people. And that is a good society. Yeah.
Yeah,
Help
yeah,
help each other and through hardship and so on. So compassion is therefore, then suddenly I thought, wow, apart from the four pillars, there is another thing called compassion, and that's the essence of humanity. And that's what we are all, whatever religion you're in, that's what it is to make we're helping each other out. Yeah, that exactly demonstrated really well right now in the pandemic, and the people are, you know, I say great majority of the people are just so willing to get together and do the things that the government, the experts wanting us to do to hold this pandemic down, and that's what exactly we're doing. Compared with some countries where they just blasé about it, they just dilly dally, and they didn't believe in it until they lost hundreds of thousands of people, and then they start to panic. And there's a difference in in that's why again it reminded me how well I chosen Australia to be my home.
Definitely. I actually that's part of one of my questions. There was three parts to this
Yes,
question. It's obviously China's changed a lot now, so I'll ask all three in one go, and then then I'll give you a chance to have a
sure.
think about it. How do you feel about China now? The next section is Hong Kong. Is obviously another pivotal place in your life. Um, it was a refuge for you and for lots of other people fleeing the poverty that was in China. It's now undergoing a significant period of change again. Sort of, how does Hong Kong feel to you? How do you feel about Hong Kong? And finally, the third bit is about the Central Coast. We were having a chat the other day about the Central Coast and how that we came up to the coast at the same time. And so the background story to how you finally made the Central Coast your home.
Well, well, well. Firstly, Central Coast, in fact, was very much to me when I was looking around for a place to set up my practice and to give back to the community. That Central Coast, in fact, reminded me very much of Shichi, my hometown. It was a small town in those days. There were only 50,000 people or less, and everyone seemed to know everybody, everyone. And and um, I was looking away from Sydney because Sydney was, I felt it was too big a city, and I spent some time when I was at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital being trained to be a doctor, to be an intern and residents and registrars and so on. Then I was sent to Bathurst District Hospital, where I thought, wow, such a lovely little place, only about 15,000, 20,000 people. Then I was going there. But then that weekend, when we were about to leave with our little firstborn daughter, I got a phone call from them and saying they had some emergency in town with multiple car accidents, and all the doctors were, every GP would put their hands in to help out. Because the district hospital had only two other doctors working there. So because we all packed, so we came up here with my wife's cousins. She has three cousins. They moved up a couple of years ahead of us, and they all loving it so much. And so we came up and to pay them a visit. And then from there, interesting thing in Wyoming, they took us around in Wyoming, and they said, "Oh, that'd be a really good spot. It's outside of Gosford, and you know, and you see all the empty blocks and all this, and half of Wyoming wasn't built, and then people couldn't even afford to have their picket fence around their houses, and we could see all these nappies hanging on the line, and it was just so beautiful, so inviting, and so that's why I said, that's it, that's a place I like to come and offer my help, my assistance. So that's how I picked Central Coast, and we never looked back. And it's been so good. Two other children were born here. So the three of them, they finished up now. I mean, they actually moved back to Sydney with their little families living in Sydney for their work. But then before I decided on Australia as my home, I had a wonderful little holiday, and something to share with you is I was invited to Coonabarabran by a classmate because I had nowhere to go the first school holiday, and those days there were three terms, and he took me home on a nice train, and it took a whole night to get there to Coonabarabran, that far away, and I was just so impressed by it, and it was a tough time. It was drought and had no rain, and everyone, look up to the sky waiting for rain. And the family was very rather modest with four children, and yet we share, and they share everything with me, and I was just
Yeah. Friendship is something that comes through throughout the book as well too. And there's one which you won't be surprised when I pick this passage, because we talked about it the other day. You had a friend in Sick Creek. Hopefully
well,
I'm saying that correctly.
what was that?
Um,
A friend.
yeah, you had a friend growing up in China.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Ardong, and I really love the description. So this book has a lot of humor and has a lot of beautiful passages in it. For such a difficult time, it has some really. He was your neighbour, and he lived down the road from you. And Ardong's father was a senior union official, and I understood that made him an important comrade in our time. We rarely saw him around. His mother cared for her son and his younger sisters. Ardong had a protruding stomach, which his mother said was full of worms that consumed almost all the food he ate, leaving him with twiggy limbs. No herbs could fix his problem. His skinniness was exaggerated by his big round head, which seemed ready to fall off his thin neck whenever he ran or chuckled. And he loved to chuckle. That's when his head would sway and his belly jerk. We were a happy little gang minding our own business. And his mother, Arndog, was 2 years older than you, but you were in the same class at school. And his mother blamed the worms for his slowness
Yeah.
in learning. However, I didn't think there was anything wrong with him. He was witty, likable, and mischievous, and brought a lot of fun to our gang. So, you know, your friendships mean the world to you. It comes across beautifully, and you have such compassion and love for your friends coming through there.
Yes,
And Adong is one of my favorite people in the story.
thank you. Yes, yes. Looking back now, even though times were so hard and harsh, but as children, we like all children, we're adaptable and we make our own games, we make our own toys, and we just have our own fun. And good old Adong, he he did really well in life, given the opportunity. And I didn't know that after, until 20, 30 years later, when I got this phone call. Somehow he got my phone number and rang me, and he wanted to come and see me. And the first thing he said to me was, "I'll die happy now that I have seen you." So that's Adong. Now, a little bit about Adong. Adong is now one of the richest men in Macau, and he didn't go through high school whatsoever because the time I left China, I didn't know that he was also leaving China because his uncle was the one who helped the authority to allow people to go, and the time was so bad. He obviously thought, "Oh well, better let my nephew go so that he may survive." So he became an apprentice, and for 3 years, a motor mechanic apprentice. He ate, he slept in the workshop for 3 years until he became a mechanic, but still the wages were so poor. And eventually, he would become an escalator uh, mechanic and installer. And then later on, he set up his own firm, and service all of those casino escalators and lift installation and services. He still got his um, company there, and he lives there 6 months a year, 6 months in Canada. So Adong, as soon as he found me, he said, I'll be here this weekend." He just flew over and spent 4 days, and we had 4 lovely days together. And we are now in close contact. Basically every week we ran each other and FaceTime and how things are going. Yeah,
And that's one of the main themes that comes across in your book, in your story, is that
yeah,
regardless of how your family and your friends are separated from distance or circumstances, you're still connected, and you still
yeah,
maintain that connection over the years, and it's just beautiful to see.
yes. That connection is just like
Yeah.
you are siblings. Yes.
Now, I'm very aware that we've gone way over time, which I thought we I thought we might do. Were there any questions? I haven't got the chat box open. Let me just have a quick look and see.
Oh,
Anybody
there
got any
was
questions?
there were sorry, there was this about, yeah, you asked me, which I'm sorry, I forgot to answer that. What did I think about Hong Kong today? And I must say, I was really, I have been very grateful to Hong Kong for allowing someone like escape into Hong Kong as a refugee and stay. So I spent 6.5, 7 years in Hong Kong before coming here. And um, then it really upset me to see the riots last year, and the destruction. The rioters destroyed so much infrastructure and causing so much hardship for the people in Hong Kong, and I felt really sorry for them.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know the motives behind it, but then of course on the media it said all about freedom. Uh, they didn't want their freedom to be taken away by the Chinese government, and the Chinese government did give them 50 years of self-administration, but causing so much trouble there, then recently I believe that they put in their they put them under their own control at the moment. So things seem to be a little bit quieter, but I hope things will work out for the people. 7 million people nowadays living in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And what about China? And I don't go back very often, but each time I go back, I just felt very welcome. And some 10 years or so ago, I went back with some friends, Australian friends, and show off my hometown. And in fact, the mayor or the town's administrator, they they put out a red carpet for us to welcome me back as one of their long lost, not lost, but long time uh, person, people born there, and reassure me that, oh yeah, we all change. Things are not the same as when you were young. People come and go, and the 300 million people travel out overseas, and they all come back with good ideas. And there's even a train coming into town, which I worked hard for when I was a kid, trying to make steel, hoping one day it would come to our town. And the steel actually was now made from Australian iron ore. And the fast train came in through our town. Yeah, so it's just like very different. People people can afford things and they go out having lunch together, the whole family, young child lunch and every week and people don't wear really rags like they used to be.
Yeah. And
So to
that's
me, I don't live there, but to me that's how the impression I got that they have done something amazing in the last 40 odd years.
and that's so beautiful to hear that your hometown is thriving. That's,
Yes, it
yeah.
is thriving, and now they incorporated the surrounding little towns and villages, and plus Nike. They built this huge factory there with their own tennis courts and sports fields and gardens and shopping centers for their employees working there. And our hometown run out of manpower to work in those like those big factories, and they had to they have to have other people from other inland states to come into our state to work there. So and someone was saying that they're going to make Zhongshan, or the city of Zhongshan now is called, and Sheki, Shiqi, now becomes just a suburb. It's a CBD of
Mm.
Zhongshan City. Now it's got 3 million people.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
over
That's
3 million, huge.
so.
Yeah.
Do we have, I'm just very conscious of the
Sure.
time now. Is there any questions that have come up in the chat box? I can't see any in there. I'm going to just, please feel free to pop any questions you have for Andrew in there. I'm just going to quickly finish off my last little bit with saying thank you very, very much for joining us today. It's been an absolute honour. I'm very, very pleased. Before we go, I just wanted to hold up your book again, um, and just say that I found this book is poignant, at times confronting, and a very, very human story. It conveys compassion, determination, and resilience, not just for Andrew, but his family, friends, and community. It's full of snippets and wisdom and advice about that the reader can take or leave as they choose. And I found it humbling to read, and a reminder that not all people experience the fundamental right to feel safe. And that's my little 2 cents worth on the book. It was absolutely lovely, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And thanks
Bye.
everybody for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed today's presentation, and obviously if you would like to borrow the book, jump onto the library's website. It is pretty heavily reserved at the moment, but I will return my copy so someone else can have a read. And if you someone's holding their book up there,
Thank you.
and if you would like to, obviously, if you're considering purchasing your own copy for yourself or for a friend, just make sure you check out our independent booksellers on the coast. And if you would like to book into any more of our events, we have lots coming up. So just check out the website and see if there's something else that takes your fancy on there. But a very, very, very big thank you to Andrew, and thank you for choosing the Central Coast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for the great talk. I really enjoyed it.
That was
Thank
really-
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Andrew. That was amazing. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Andrew. It was just wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And
Thank you, everybody.